Sculptures have beautified Vanadzor with their works. Everyone knows very well where the sculptures are, except for the statue of Anush. Only the elderly knew where it was, because after the earthquake, metal containers used as temporary shelter known as domeks had blocked it from sight. When the area was developed and the domeks removed, many were taken by surprise at the sight of Tumanyan's heroine. Vanadzor started to gain its former appearance only 10 years after the 1988 earthquake, when the government developed a new policy with new approaches and timelines. In 1988, the major problem of the earthquake zone was the inflated 10-year-old waiting lists of homeless and the ever-increasing demand for new apartments. In the north of Armenia, it was already the 10th winter that people were living in domeks. Even those with other accommodations were unwilling to give up their domeks located in the center part of the town and move to their suburban apartments because of transportation and other social problems. When the Housing Purchase Certificates, or HPC, pilot project was launched, the earthquake zone was facing similar problems. Within a few years, this collaboration between USAID and the Urban Institute transformed the earthquake zone into a development zone, thus solving the problem of thousands of homeless people.
And that was the big idea right there. That was the single largest idea, that we would look in these communities and say, how can we redistribute and make more efficient the housing that was already existing, and get these poor people, these poor families out of the domeks and into some of these apartments that were sitting empty. In some cases, families would have to make the decision, well, do we double up and sell one of our apartments? And so the market behaved as predicted. So that was the big new idea.
As to the advantages of the certificate program, firstly, the Urban Institute managed to clean up the lists of the claimants. That is, they conducted a thorough investigation in the earthquake zone, which had not been carried out before. As a result, we achieve a reduction in the lists of victims by 25 to 28%. Secondly, there is the economic advantage. The efficiency of the certificate program as compared with housing construction was threefold, or even 4 times greater. Put into figures, it translates to the following. At the start of the program, an apartment was bought at an average price of $3,000 to $3,500, while around $15,000 were required for construction of one apartment. The major difficulty, as expected, was the acceptance of the program by the population. On one hand, there were the newly constructed housing units with cozy yards and entrances that had the pleasant smell of fresh paint, while on the other hand, there was the HPC with its nominal value, which was far from a dream home, a roof, and security. This is when the Urban Institute launched a massive public awareness campaign. So this was the situation. Unemployed, hungry people who have been living in domeks for about 12 years already and have lost their trust and belief in anyone. They do not trust either Armenians or Americans. Their remarks at our meeting sounded mostly like this: you're an American agent who has come to buy our land to sell to America, and then you too will ultimately run off to America. This is what they used to say.
Որ դուք ամերիկյան գործակալ եք, որ եկել եք այստեղ, որ մեզ համոզեք, այս տարածքները, որտեղ որ մենք բնակվում ենք, գնեք մեզանից, վաճառեք Միացյալ Նահանգներին, եւ դուք էլ փախնեք Միացյալ Նահանգներ։
Բավականին մեծ զանգված
A fairly large group involved in the construction industry, several building companies and a few state officials, believed that the program should not be implemented as it might be too complicated. They had reservations that the program might cause the demise of the entire building industry because its implementation didn't support actual reconstruction of the earthquake zone, but rather a process of purchasing the existing housing stock. Having finalized the pilot project, the Urban Institute, in close cooperation with USAID, the government of Armenia, regional and local authorities, launched the program by which, at its completion 3 years later, 7,200 eligible households would be provided with permanent housing. The advantages of the HPC became apparent starting from the very first transactions. Advantages of the HPC: buying a housing unit anywhere in Armenia, buying an apartment one room larger than the one lost if the family has grown, a quick solution of the housing problem not dependent on construction, in certain cases keeping some cash from the deal, getting full ownership rights in just 2 years instead of 5 years required by other programs. The efficiency of the program in Lori Mars reached almost 100%. One can see its benefits simply by taking a quick spin around the Lori Mars Center. The areas not long ago occupied with domics have turned into parks, stores, and apartment blocks. In fact, by reducing the number of the homeless households, the HPC program has also enhanced the volume of public works undertaken in the Mars. The funding formerly allocated for construction of residential buildings was now reallocated to other construction projects. In the year 2004, 2 school buildings, 2 community centers, bridges, and roads are under construction in Lori Mars. Natural gas supply is also being restored to the city. Private construction worth around 2 billion drams is in progress now, whereas only 1,100 million drams have been allocated for the budget-funded construction projects. This year, the volume of private construction in Gyumri has reached 4 billion drams. All this would have been impossible if the areas now under construction were still occupied by domics, which were a headache for the population and the local government, as well as for builders and architects. In rural communities in Lori and Shirak Marzez, over 660 eligible families were awarded housing renovation grants. In this way, they were given the possibility to complete unfinished houses, which was started right after the disaster. In completing the half-built houses, the Urban Institute collaborated with Catholic Relief Services. Spending about the same as the price of a housing purchase certificate, families received new, renovated accommodations, while the local government provided the necessary utilities, water, sewer, and power supply. This project is also an excellent example of collaboration among international donor organizations. We are moving into the new house tomorrow. My son is returning from the army, so we'll give him a royal welcome. During the regular meetings held by stakeholders, new ideas were born and possibilities created to make the best of the project. Throughout the implementation, a key factor for success was the cooperation among government bodies, donors, and community NGOs. They did a wonderful job. What I dream of now is that they take on another challenge, undertake a similar task, and the problem would be eliminated for good.
Spitak
is one of the unique towns of the world where districts, schools, and hospitals are named after different nations and countries. In Spitak, you can find a Norwegian hospital and a Finnish polyclinic, a Czech school, and an Italian district. It was here in Spitak that the first promise was made to lift the town from rubble within 2 years. In the following years, the promises of the Soviet leaders vanished into thin air. The general plan of Spitak was adopted only in 1998. The recovery of the town center started. To start construction of new buildings funded by the Lindsay Foundation, the All-Armenian Fund, and the state budget, it was necessary to clear the central streets. The residents of Spitak, almost completely obliterated by the earthquake, were now crammed into domics. Hence, the certificates were put into operation, which helped solve a number of public works problems. It did a lot of good. Within only 6 months, 270 families became homeowners. TV programs were broadcast. People were filmed in their new houses, expressing their joy and happiness. But for us, the reduction of the waiting list is more than happiness. It is bliss. For us, for the mayor and the government, it is a blessing when the waiting list is reduced by even one eligible person. However, another must still persist: jobs. The collaboration was perfect in many respects. From the very beginning, fundamental guidelines were established. Only this category of people should get a certificate when they produce this or that document, and so on. As a result, good work was achieved. The HPC program was implemented in Spitak and Vanadzor for 2 years. During that period, the local offices closely collaborated with community leaders and local NGOs. I highly appreciate the teamwork carried out by the staff of the Urban Institute in cooperation with the NGOs, which produced good results in Lori Mars. During the work carried out by the Urban Institute in Lori Mars, 1,388 housing purchase certificates were issued. 1,153 certificates were redeemed for housing purchase transactions, 535 Vanadzor, 260 Spitak, 132 in Gugark, 397 in Stepanovan. 60 certificates were granted in Aparan. All were redeemed for purchase of housing. The Greek proverb goes, one should have the patience of an Armenian to build Yerzhenka 20 times again and again. The city of Kumairi, Alexandropol, Leninikon, was destroyed by earthquakes several times. The last shock changed the town beyond recognition. For visitors, the road leading to Gumri was the silent and eloquent witness of the disaster. The removal of some domics from various sites may have addressed the homeless problem, but it would certainly not have fostered further development of the city. To achieve impact, a good first impression, and efficiency, the site-based approach was implemented, again employing the Urban Institute's know-how. Today, a visitor traveling from the capital city upon entering Gumri doesn't get the impression of a disaster zone.
So we decided right here, and that we would start with the entrance, because we needed, again, as I mentioned, to present a new face. And then, if the pilot site, which was deep enough and large enough and had enough domics, was successful, then we would proceed in more limited corridors. And we called these corridors of recovery. So that's what we did. And initially we just had Yerevan and Hajuhi, Terian, the entire historic district, and the Haktanak, Sayat Nova, Nejde corridor, and that was it.
After removal of the domics, there were sites that were put in order and handed over to the population for the purpose of private construction. Now people have houses and services. It is a fact that the program did stimulate this activity. Its impact on the dynamics of city life has been favorable.
And then we decided, well, let's think about what the streetscape should look like. And very importantly, once the buildings were constructed, and this can actually be seen today, we would also leave sites for services and commercial objects, with the hope that the private sector, seeing that the community had stabilized, seeing that people were living there and dressing better and walking on the streets, would have some need for services and support. So we see barbers, and we see dentists, and we see flower shops, and we see grocery stores, and we see all of those elements that are integral to a vibrant community.
In Gumri, there are buildings that were severely damaged by the earthquake. Nevertheless, people kept on living in them. To address the needs of these partially occupied buildings, a pilot project was conducted to find low-cost solutions to renovating and recommissioning these buildings. The question posed was, if the buildings were stabilized and the common areas repaired, would residents use their own resources to renovate their apartments? It was not long before a positive response followed. In 2002, the opening ceremony of the residential building at 155 Yerevanyan Avenue took place. Looking at the building now, one would wonder why such great importance was attributed to it then. Why was its reopening such a celebration? In fact, this building was an example of the collaboration of the citizens, the local government, and the Urban Institute, which later caught on with the population living nearby. New areas were cleared, renovated, and put back into order. Right here, at number 155 Yerevanyan Avenue, the first condominium was established. A building, a site cleared of Domeks, the joy of the person who has received a new home, a school bell ringing in a stone school is enough for Gyumri to smile. On the 31st of October, 6 wedding parties were circling Aznavour Square, which was built on a site cleared of Domeks, using housing purchase certificates. Foreman Levan Mukuchan is the owner of a 4-room apartment which he acquired with an HPC. Today, he's in charge of the construction of the new trade center of Gyumri. Levan says that in 2 years' time, Aznavour Square will achieve its finished appearance. There were 5 or 6 Domeks there. Now they have been cleared away. Whenever Domeks are removed, something new is built in their place. That's for sure. And these are not just typical structures, these are good buildings with style and strength. This is Charles Aznavour Square. We want to surround it with beautiful buildings. There were Domeks here before. Those were taken away. People found apartments. And now a building is being erected here. In 1988, Gyumri School No. 9, 423 pupils and 23 teachers lost their lives. People used to live here. With the help of housing purchase certificates, they obtained new apartments and left the site. In the year 2000, the school moved from Domeks back to this building. Now it has 430 pupils. The development of Nijde Street and the Huntsman neighborhood became possible only after liberating the sites from Domeks through issuing HPCs to the people who eventually left their Domeks. Gevorg Grigorian, a schoolteacher from Getashan village, says that when he first saw his new apartment, he could not return to his Domek. He just stayed there, even though the rooms were still empty, and just slept on the floor. When these guys told me that they were going to give me an apartment, I told them to breathe out. They must have been drinking. How come that I had neither applied nor asked for anything, nor had I eased my way through with money? Nothing of the kind. The point is that we had seen the worst, and now all this fills us with joy. It's just hard to imagine that after 15 years of burning anything to warm ourselves, we now simply have to push a button and the heating comes on in the apartment. First, this building was the Shiraz Home Museum, and then it became a homeless shelter. People lived in the museum and the Domeks surrounding it until the year 2000. In the end, 9 families remained, but after that, 80 to 90 people were registered here. The Housing Purchase Certificate program, conceived by the Urban Institute in the earthquake zone, operated at 3 dimensions simultaneously.
The physical plan was, how do we physically address the redevelopment of these communities, of both the urban and the rural areas? How do we physically address the domiks, the containers that were brittling every site in many of these communities? How do we physically recover sites? How do we physically service these sites with infrastructure? So the physical plan was the more traditional urban planning approaches, and we tried to engage best international practices. Housing purchase certificates to clear urban sites. So the housing certificate not only provided an opportunity to get a person into a permanent housing unit, but there were also some other secondary results. One was, of course, clearing the sites of domiks, and the other one was that the funds, the transfers from buyer to seller, would be recirculated in the marketplace to affect a broader economic development of the community. The social plan, very important, the people. I always would tell my staff that at the end of the day, this strategy was executed 80% on the social aspects, 10% maybe economic, and 10% engineering, physical, because once you had the confidence of the population, the plan would work. And it was not only the people who were going to receive a certificate or to receive a grant to complete their home, but it was the entire neighborhood.
When the document was signed in Moscow dissolving the Soviet Union, the event echoed in Gyumri with grave silence. All at once, the construction cranes halted and the hammers stopped their creative banging. The promise to recover the earthquake zone in 2 years vanished, as did the multinational builders who returned to their countries. There was no more USSR. Gyumri, with all its troubles, was left all alone. Good intentions became jobs half done. These are the Gyumri graveyards of goodwill. And this was to be Gyumri's residential district, stripped of its value in seconds, and to be left sitting idle for more than 10 years. I remember that before the launch of this program, people sold apartments for $200, $500. They even exchanged them for an airline ticket to Moscow. But within 1 year from the start of the program, the sums that we had assigned to back the certificates came up. This was an indication that real estate prices were going up briskly, even in the Mush and Ani districts. We spoke about raising prices for the second time in January, February 2003. Well, every year we discuss this, but this time our surveys indicated that the purchasing rate had slowed down. Compared with the former rate of 100 transactions monthly, we now had around 60 to 70. According to our studies, there were only about 12 sales which occurred without certificates. The remaining transactions were all within our program. As a result, the nominal value of the certificates was raised by an average of 15 to 20%. Meanwhile, another source of Gyumri's housing stock was passing into oblivion, and as they say, to the relief of all citizens of Gyumri. The domiks started to vanish from sight. At first, domiks were basic shelter. Then they served as necessary dwellings, and later they were condemned as a cause of health deterioration and frayed nerves. Domiks changed the face of a whole city and the psychology of a whole generation. They had encircled All Saviors Church, had occupied the surrounding parkland, the central square, the Shirakatsi district, the parks, and were constant reminders of the overwhelming disaster. Domiks deserved a fate such as this. Our dream was not to have a single damek in Gumri. Sayat Nova Street is lined with a park on one side and a recovery corridor on the other. A little further, a shop is opened. A renovated part of a ground floor is offered for rent. The mayor of Gumri says that small businesses are flourishing. Today, many people seek an appointment with him not to ask for humanitarian aid, but to request support in starting their private businesses. Life has changed. Yes, it has really changed. Gumri residents never received so many apartments under any other presidency or during any other period of time. Only right after 1988, when the USSR still existed and the 59th district and other districts were built, did anything similar happen. Since then, housing distribution has never been on such a large scale.
We worked with our local government partners. How? With land disposition programs where we would say, let's identify which parcels will be for lease, help you advertise them and promote those. We introduced real estate marketing. I mean, a fairly simple technique that we use in the West, where signs would go up on every site, and as each one was rented or leased or sold, there'd be a banner that would go across saying, leased, and the subliminal message there was, well, I'm too late, I'm going to try to get the next one.
Really, the city has managed to get out of that rut, that terrible situation. To everybody's joy, it has straightened its spine, straightened its back, by the will of the Almighty and blessed by our God. The phrase disaster zone has become an indispensable part of our vocabulary. Like patient creditors, Gumri, Vanadzor, and Spitak had witnessed countless promises of recovery. It was this project that, in this office, became known as the Recovery Zone Bible. The official name is A New Strategy for the Earthquake Zone. Thanks to this document, the earthquake zone experienced its third transformation.